Okay, we'll get started with our last session of the day. In this session, we have some tips for SaTC proposals from Saul, and then I think I've forgotten now, open Q&A. Oh, yes, and then Carl is going to give us some important tips for what to do once you get that award. I should say, I'll introduce both now, and you can just go right after Saul. So Carl's not going to talk about how you actually do your research. That would be a whole nother workshop that we should maybe have, or someone should have sometime, and there are actually probably some things devoted to that kind of thing, but he's going to talk about some of the procedural things, in particular your communications with NSF after you get your award. So we'll hear from Saul and Carl, and then we've got some time still for open Q&A if you have any still unanswered questions that you'd like to ask the program officers at that time.
Thanks. Okay, when I was asked to say a few words about tips for writing proposals, I didn't know if I'd be going in the morning or the afternoon. During the day, I've heard a lot of these points covered to some extent, or at least mentioned, and I'll go a little faster over those. And so what I did is I put together things that I've learned from being in a lot of panels. Some of you have served on panels, some of you haven't. I think I've been to more panels than anyone in this room. So what I did is put together some observations about what I hear people discussing and what turns them off about your proposal and what turns them on. So I decided to put it into a top 10 list for no other reason that it helped me get this talk made up. It's just my observations gleaned from panels. This is not an official NSF bulletin or announcement or document, publication, just my opinions. Other program directors might have picked different things to talk about, or might even disagree with me, and they should speak up afterwards if they do. But the bottom line is use your own judgment. And finally, this isn't really a top 10 list. For one thing, it's not going to be humorous, and for another thing, I think there are 11 items, not 10. So let's start with the title and the project summary, which Jeremy already stole from me, but I'll go over very quickly. You should make the title and the project summary as clear as you possibly can. As was mentioned, these are used to decide whether or not your proposal should be returned without review. Is it out of scope? Should it be transferred to another program? Or what panel would have the best expertise to review your proposal? So in a sense, we're reading the intellectual merit, the broader impacts, and your introductory paragraph to determine what kind of expertise do we need to review it. So think of it from our point of view when you're writing it that way. Avoid distracting digressions, allusions, puns, ambiguities. I guess if you have a really good metaphor, use it. But don't just wax poetic and say to be or not to be, that is the question, or something like that. So some program director, maybe the one who's the primary moderator of the panel, is going to read your proposal. But before it gets to a panel, there could be 5 program directors who see it, think about it, discuss it with others. Okay? So don't forget to say why the research is important. Remember, we're trying to decide whether to fund your proposal. We're not just trying to be fascinated by the ideas. So you might make some statements that you might consider meta. Don't assume that all the reviewers know why it's important. You know, that's why you want to work in the area. But sometimes you're in a room with the reviewers, the panelists, and they say, well, does somebody care about this? I'm not sure. And people will give high ratings if it's good work and they care about it. Someone else will give low ratings if, well, it looks pretty good to me, but I'm not sure. Like the biometric example. This is great math. This is, looks like a fabulous idea, but is it really, why is this so important? Well, in the second proposal that Oleg wrote, those ideas came through, but not in the first one. So the bottom line is, why should the nation invest in this research? And we at NSF have to defend that. So we want you to tell the reviewers so they can tell us so that we can fund it. Okay, comparison to related work. When you do a comparison to related work, you're establishing that the work has not been done already by someone else. That's the most basic thing. We're not going to fund something that's sort of done or has been done by someone else. And the onus is on you to explain this to us. So why is your work going to be a significant advance? So what we do see sometimes is that, well, I have to do related work, so let me tell you everybody else who's working on something that's sort of related, so here's 100 references. Well, that doesn't help very much. You know, malware has been studied, references 1 to 20. I mean, sometimes the first sentence says 1 to 100. I really... and then you've got a great bibliography section, but nobody knows that your work is new and worth doing. So use the related work section to justify the approach, highlight originality, show the comparative effectiveness or make promises about that, and what are the potential breakthroughs. Okay, sometimes you'll notice from related work that everyone's encountering a certain bottleneck, you know, some brick wall, and you're going to explain that this is why I'm working on this, because everybody really needs a solution to this problem for them to continue on their work. More efficient algorithm, whatever. Okay, and don't forget about the prior work by you. So I think it's a relatively new requirement. I mean, you've always had to put in your proposal prior work funded by NSF. Now you also have to put intellectual merit and broader impacts, at least a couple of sentences about each of those things. So you should use that opportunity to clarify what you've done already, and in contrast, this new project is on a continuation or on a new direction or something like that. Don't make the readers guess how your recent publications are related to the proposed project. So there are a lot of discussions in a panel where a panelist will say, well, I know they've been working on this a while, and I'm looking at this proposal to find out what the new work is. Looks like, of course, you're not done in 3 years. Some work takes 20 years, 10 years. But they have to explain what they're going to do in the next 3 or 4 years. So what is that, and how does it compare to the prior? I've also heard discussions of, I think, or maybe I was on a program committee and I saw a paper on this by these people. So how do they tell if the work's done? One reviewer will say the work is done, I saw it published. Another will say, well, that's just one publication. We don't give someone $500,000 to write one paper. There must be more to be done. So anyway, explain how the, if you've done preliminary work, then explain how that validates the assumptions you were making, or justifies further exploration. Okay, project management and coordination. If you have a medium project or a frontiers, you have to put something in there or it'll be returned without review. But on any proposal, you want to give the reader confidence that you actually have some frontal lobe activity going on there, that we're looking into this question, we don't know what the answer is, we're going to put some students to work on this, where, you know, it looks like these are the key elements. You have to make it look like you've, you know, really thought this through. So some kind of coordination, if you have a co-PI, a collaborator at a different institution, are you going to hold weekly meetings? Are you going to, if you have to integrate something to make a tool, or, you know, somehow synergize, then how are you going to do that? Do that. I think the instructions actually say in the solicitation, you should do that to the extent necessary. Nobody's saying make it 2 pages, make it 2 sentences. Do it to the extent necessary to give the reader confidence that you're thinking about how you're applying your resources. Okay, the research process. Show that you thought about contingencies. I've seen proposals that say, we want to learn something about how vulnerabilities are put into computer programs. So in year 1, we're going to design a research methodology and a data collection scheme. In year 2, we're going to collect data. In year 3, we're going to analyze it. In year 4, we're going to publish our results. So there are no contingencies there. If they can't figure out how to get the data, the project's dead in year 1. So you have to give some thought to your research process, and if people read your proposal and see that you haven't really given a lot of thought to it, they're going to wonder, what if they don't find what they're hoping to find? What are they going to do next? So you have to give enough possibilities, enough possible directions to make it credible. Okay. Sometimes the research process itself is, of value to other researchers. It's actually a result of your research. So if you've figured out how to organize data so you can do queries on it, so that you can analyze and get results, then maybe other researchers will be able to use that as well. So this is a valuable outcome of your research. Research evaluation. I think at the last panel that I ran, for more than, well, every panel summary either said there's no evaluation plan, or the evaluation plan is weak, or more details are needed of the evaluation plan, or the best case is, well, it seems to be a pretty good evaluation plan. But what you should really do is think carefully about what are you evaluating for. If you're making progress, if you're advancing the field, then how do you measure that? And actually, again, this could be a contribution to the field. You might say, well, we need benchmarks. So you set up benchmarks. Maybe 5 years later, people will say, I'm sure glad that researcher, developed all these benchmarks. We all use them now. But at least for your own research, give some thought to how you're going to evaluate. Again, you leave a panel sitting there very uncertain about whether what you do is going to be valuable because you don't say explicitly. One reviewer says, oh, if they just do that, I know it's going to be good. I don't need an evaluation plan. You have another reviewer who says, this is research. If you don't have an evaluation plan, it's not science. And so you're putting your proposal at risk if you don't do something here. Okay, also there's the pursuit of science question. Some proposals don't seem to have a lot of scientific content. They say we'll build the tool and then we're done. We'll build the tool and we'll find users and then we're done. So science, I'm not going to define science in great depth, but usually you're building a body of long-lasting knowledge. Something that you've learned is still, it's going to be worth putting in a textbook or worth knowing. It's not going to be a passing fad. You might have theories that explain phenomena, maybe not that well, but maybe the research methodology is to improve how well your theory matches the phenomena and to improve that over time. Reality can be represented by data. How well can you validate the data? And so on and so forth. Science involves characterizing problems, and then you get a community to agree this is a really important problem and a lot of people should be working on it. The government should fund it. And so that's kind of a long-lasting thing. There's this important problem. Astronomers don't have trouble. They have big questions like what's out there. Physicists don't have this problem. They say, well, what's in there? And we just say, I wonder if I build this mousetrap if it'll be better than the other guy's mousetrap. And that just doesn't sound as scientific. So if you could, think about what the scientific method is or the science questions are that you're working on. You might end up with some paradigm shifts. I guess if you're going to shift a paradigm, you had to have a paradigm in the first place. Anyway, and again, part of science is the conscious, explicit evaluation to show that one of these problems is getting solved or that you're advancing towards a solution over time. And also science involves communities of people working together. You might be sharing data, reproducing experiments, and so on and so forth. So if your proposal doesn't seem to have anything that's on this slide, then it's likely that a panel is going to say, well, this sounds interesting to do. I hope they do it, but where's the science? This is the National Science Foundation. Okay. We're down to 2. The SaTC mission is important. It's very important for a SaTC proposal. You have to say how your program relates to the SaTC mission. Again, Oleg's proposal is a perfect example. You can see in his new proposal this half page that says relationship to SaTC. So you don't have to be so crass, but, but I mean, obviously the reviewers told him that this looks like great bio-optical, you know, whatever research, but what's it have to do with SaTC? And maybe the reviewer is sitting there imagining the connection, but the feedback was, you better tell us the connection. So he did, and that was good. So I'm telling you now, you don't have to go through that. Okay. One thing that makes the SaTC mission has, you know, a list of bumper stickers like moving target and forensics and all of those things. So is your stuff relevant to any of the topics that are in the solicitation? Also, if you're trying to have security, then you have to be safe against threats. So a lot of proposals will talk about threats, attack models, or societal scenarios that we need to deal with, and what's the research underlying that will make society safer and function better and things like that. Some SaTC proposals may be more foundational. There may be formal methods for X, or there may be hardware topics or software topics that are foundational. We might consider that your proposal belongs more in a core program, or we might decide that, you know, we really need research in this area that's not getting funded elsewhere. So we will fund a more foundational proposal. But still, you should do a pretty good job of relating it to the SaTC themes. Okay, so often when I see a proposal come in on a core topic, like say programming languages, obviously programming languages are part of the SaTC picture, but if it's just developing a new programming language for something, it needs to make a better pitch to SaTC than that. Also, a source of information about what our themes for SaTC are consistent with and somewhat driven by the national needs and priorities that are talked about at the NITRD, NITRD.gov website, which is an interagency working, you know, it sets up interagency working groups, and the computer cybersecurity and information assurance CSIA working group there has nice sort of white paperish information that you can use. And also CINCI, which is about 4 years old now, the National Cybersecurity Initiative is at whitehouse.gov, and so you can see what words people use and how they talk and what they emphasize as being the national needs and priorities. Now, obviously, not all of your research will fit under that, and I hope you'll do new things that don't fit under that, but if you're looking for some guidance, you'll see things there, and the websites are on the bottom. I don't think I need to say more about broader impacts. I had tossed that in, and but it seems like we've talked about that a lot today. The only comment I will make is that there seems to be a difference between proposals that give lip service. You know, they list all the things they're going to do that seem to fit into the definition of broader impacts, but there are other proposals that actually have activities planned. They have students going out and doing things. They spend money on it. They actually, you know, have project activities which have broader impacts. Maybe you serve on an election board in your state because your expertise is on, you know, secure elections and so on and so forth. Finally, number 11, which is number 0, is this is your career. So you're going to work on topics you believe in and that motivate you. As you work, you're always building up your CV, you're building up your track record, which increases the possibility of funding in the future. You should definitely network with others to build community around important areas. If there's no workshop in your area and you think there should be, then, you know, figure out all the people in the world you would like to have at a workshop. Let us know. Maybe we'll be able to help you fund a workshop like that. And in any case, propose your best ideas. I've heard several people today say you've got to start with good ideas and everything else is just opinions and advice. And I think that's true. Okay?
All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about so once you get your award, what you have to do. So as you know, money's not free. If someone's giving you money, they expect something for it. So National Science Foundation, the government is, and actually the taxpayers aren't any different. So they do expect something from you. So the number one thing to remember is communication's key. Always communicate with your program officers, whether it's good or bad. They want to hear certain things like scientific or technical breakthroughs, unexpected issues, if you're having problems spending your funds, or if you're changing PIs, if your co-PI is leaving and you're picking up another one, or if you yourself as the PI is leaving and you're transferring to someone else. The sooner you tell your program officer, the better. All right, so what we require is 3 different types of reports to the NSF. The first one is an annual report. You'll give this every year, your final report, and then your project outcome. Some of the things that they're used for is they provide oversight for NSF on the project. They also justify the investment that the program officers saw that why they picked your proposal. It informs the public how the tax dollars that they gave you is being used, and it's also used for future research planning. So the first report I'm going to talk about is annual reports. So these are due every year, 3 months prior to, the due date begins 3 months prior to the end of the budget period. So if you're given an award 1 July of 2014, your first annual report would be due by 3 months prior to that. So April, thank you. So that's when it starts to become due. It's not actually overdue until July. Some of the things they want to see is they would like to see the good things, so point out some of the highlights, because they do use those through Twitter feed. I don't know if anybody's seen the NSF Twitter feed, so a lot of times they publicize some significant things you guys are doing through that. And they also want to see the bad things too. So if you're having problems, please put that in your report so the program officers can help you. The next one is the final report. This is due 90 days after your completion. So same thing, explain the impacts of your research and don't over-exaggerate. And then at the same time your final report's due, your project outcome report's due. The main thing about this is you don't want to use a lot of technical jargon or a lot of acronyms, because these are made public and anybody can read them. So the key to this is really just to let the taxpayer, Congress, see what you guys are doing. And they do read these, and especially Congress, because as you know, funds are tight. So when they start looking to kick start cutting funds, they do go out and read these, and they start picking on different organizations. So please be sure to highlight the importance of the research and be very generic. Okay, so late reports. So like I said, for your annual reports, they're due 3 months prior to. So you get an email reminder at 90, 60, 30 days, and 3 days prior to the actual due date. But the report should be submitted as soon as you get that first 90-day email, because it's not actually done until the program officers approve it. So if you submit it 3 days prior to the due date, the chances that it's going to get approved prior to the date is highly unlikely. So some consequences that happen 1 day after the due date. So let's say you submit the report 3 days prior to your due date. It still has to be reviewed by the program officers. So as soon as it hits the 1 day after the due date, these things happen. So you'll get an overdue email sent to yourself and also your institution. Your account will be flagged for overdue, and it freezes all future funds for yourself if you have a continuing grant increment, or any pending project awards for yourself and any co-PIs on your project. So bottom line, it's really serious to have late reports, and if you could help the program officers out to start submitting those reports when you first get your first notification, just so they have time to review it, because your annual report is not the only one that they're reviewing. So having late reports, we've seen it many times. It's not fun, because there's been several times where they want to award yourself or a co-PI, and then they go and they look, and you get a late report. So don't let that happen to you. And that's it.
You have a question? Oh, come on up, Chris. Actually, can I rebut for a second?
Yeah, I have something to add, just
Okay. So
maybe the same thing.
okay. Well, okay. So first, let me don't go away, Carl. We're all gonna. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk for a minute about is the late reports thing. Everyone says, "Oh, it's not a big deal. What happens? You know, I'll get a nasty email." Well, last year, we have a date by which we have to finish spending all our funds, and the Friday before that Monday, my boss came to me and said, I have a spare $1 million that another project didn't use. Can you spend it by Monday at noon? And of course, I had several projects waiting for such an eventuality. And I had a queue. My first choice project had an overdue annual report that had not been submitted. And so I'm thinking, this is 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and I have to spend this money by Monday at noon. I have to convince them to write an annual report. I have to convince another program officer, it wasn't me who was responsible, it was someone else. I have to convince another program officer to drop whatever they're doing over the weekend and review it and approve it, and then I have to do all the paperwork for this grant. Not gonna happen. They didn't get $1 million. It went to the number 2 on the list.
And let me add, the way this happens, when that report goes overdue, when our division director, our boss, goes to approve our recommendation, the button isn't there. They can't do it. August 4th, the deadline for this, it was turned off. They can no longer approve something. So, you know, it's not like, oh, we're not supposed to do this, but yeah, we'll get it in time. No, we can't do anything with it. If your report is overdue, it's not going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. And this is official NSF policy. This was a conscious decision to do this.
Can I rant too?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And then I want to turn to positive.
I mean, this is really serious. We're sitting. I think I've had maybe 40, 50, 60, I don't know, maybe this year I've had 60 overdue reports where there were 90 days to prepare and submit, and they became overdue. I've had several situations where we're trying to get an award through. It's at DGA, the Division of Grants and Agreements, and they're ready to push the button to issue the award letter, and they can't do it. They don't have the button, so they send a message to me, and I say, well, the overdue report isn't mine, it's somebody over in MPS, Math and Physical Sciences. And I find out that that person has left NSF and the proposal hasn't been reassigned in the system to anyone else, so they have to go to IT and update some kind of table. And this goes on and on and on. And it turns out that, let's see, if it's your co-PI, could be on a different award, and then I think the co-P of that could be on a different award. We need an algorithm, but there are these webs of complexity where you can't even figure out why it's blocked, but there's a real reason. So anyway, we put in, I might have everyone on this stage in an email conversation for 100 emails. I actually have a file of 100 emails about one proposal that took 5 months to unwind because of the overdue things. So anyway, I've got other stories.
Okay, let me tell something good now that we beat you up about annual reports. So if you go to nsf.gov right now, Carl was talking about all the great things we get out of annual reports. This morning on the front page of nsf.gov is a SaTC award talking about, it's actually a Rutgers project. Are you going to bring it up? Okay. That they can, it's a technique used called elastic pathing, where they can figure out where you go using only your speed. And nothing else. If they can know where you start and how fast you're going, they can figure out where you went. It's really cool stuff. Anyway, so things like that are really important to NSF to go onto a public site. I also want to add something to Saul's list, if I can read my own handwriting. Two things. One is make sure you read the solicitation. I want your list, your 10 to be 10 base 16. Read the solicitation and make sure that you get everything. There's a lot of people, we have requirements for 2 different lists at the back. of your proposal, make sure you give us both lists. You don't want to be the one known to Carl or to me or to anyone else as the person who didn't follow the instructions and give the information. It's really easy to do. Just make sure you follow the instructions. And the other thing is, if you're not a native English speaker, make sure you have someone else read your proposal before you submit it. Panelists get really annoyed if they have trouble reading your proposal because the grammar and the spelling is wrong. And if you are a native English speaker, have someone else read your proposal because they get really annoyed even if you're a native English speaker, if it's wrong. And the problems are just as bad for native and non-native English speakers. Have someone else read it. Anyone else before we open for questions? Okay, questions. Oh, come on.
Did we do that good a job?
We've worn them out.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Upgrade to Firefox?
Saul, on, you had your number 3 was where's the science, and then you had in parentheses engineering, and I wasn't sure if you were saying that engineering is not science, or that for some proposals it's where is the engineering challenge, or I just wasn't sure what you were saying about engineering in that slide.
So somehow the engineering community managed to get the word science replaced by science and engineering in every solicitation. That was probably about 30 years ago, 20 years ago. So yes, the National Science Foundation could be the National Science and Engineering Foundation. So, but even engineers say that their methods have to be based in science, and they have to be rigorous, and they're more in engineering than in, you know, the other natural sciences or physical sciences. They're interested in long-lasting knowledge and all of those other characteristics. So I didn't mean to exclude engineering, but sometimes on our panels somebody says this is just a engineering task, not science. And I always make this statement about, well, engineering's okay too, but are you saying this is just an implementation exercise? So maybe I should have said it's an just an implementation of something is not good enough. It needs to be science or engineering.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the distinction between engineering as a task and research in engineering.
Okay, thank you. I just want to actually first thank you for everyone today. It was really, really useful for me. I'm the one of the person who is coming from networking domain and trying to make a contribution in the security aspects of things. I have a question about that actually, that I see that there are multiple people on the CNS. So when we submit a proposal, we don't know really which program manager the proposal goes to, right? Like today I talked with, with Jeremy, but if I submit, if he likes my proposal, but if my proposal goes to someone else that they may not know, so how does that really work? Should we go and talk to every single program manager that is related to network?
Choose one program manager from any given program you're interested in.
Okay.
Don't talk to more than one program manager from any given program, because we're all, I mean, I know you're all very busy too, but we're also very busy, and if you take half an hour from each of our schedules to talk about whatever, and we find out about it, we're going to get annoyed that you're doing that. So pick whoever you think is the best person, and unless we tell you, you need to also go see so-and-so, please
Okay.
don't do that.
Okay, I'm actually glad to hear that we don't have to go around and see everyone,
No.
so I'm happy
I
about
mean,
that.
your proposal may not end up getting handled by whomever it is that you talk to, but that really doesn't matter.
Okay. And I have one other quick one. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. In the morning, you talked about the Cs and SP connections, and that we could actually try to submit a proposal for a new collaboration between the CS and SP people. So I wasn't sure whether, did you say that we could have two people from the same institution, let's say one from CS department and one from psychology? Was that okay to do?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and what is the deadline for it, and how much is how long the proposal has to be?
Watch. Yeah.
So those are eagers. So if you search the regular eager definition, it's 8-page as a project description. But in the new collaboration eager program, we do request a pre-submission, which means that we requested 2-pager from you as the first stage of submission, and then we have a down selection process, and then we invite limited numbers of the so-called white papers for full proposal submission. And we follow the regular definition of eager, but our new collaboration eager, their budget size tends to be smaller than the regular eagers, because by definition of the NSF eager program, it's under 300K, but the average budget size for our new collaboration eager is about 200K.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make one other comment about that? Chris was about to say this, but I'll say it. Those particular ones, there's a Dear Colleague letter, and you have to watch for the new Dear Colleague letter to come out, because right now we're not accepting those. There's going to be a deadline if we put out the request again next year, which I expect we will, but you have to watch for what the deadlines are. That's not a year-round thing, but it's also not a solicitation. It's a Dear Colleague letter. So. The best thing to do is make sure you're on the mailing list for the SaTC announcements. Pick up one of these if you didn't already, and it'll be announced when that comes out.
And if you're already here, I think Rebecca said that we would be already in the emailing list, right?
No,
No?
that's Rebecca's putting you on the
sorry,
DIMACS
I
mailing
apologize.
list.
Okay.
I'm talking about the SaTC
Oh,
mailing
okay,
list.
all right.
Sure, that would be great. Sure.
Okay, thank you for the clarifications.
Somewhere, I don't care, just pass it on back. Oh, okay, and all the way in the back there.
Okay, I'm Fanny Ye. I came from West Virginia University, and this is the second semester for me. I have a question about CRII, Research Initiation Initiative. So it said that it's expected that funds will be used to support untenured faculty or research scientists in their first 2 years in academia position after the PhD. Actually, I got my PhD at 2010, but I working in industry for 5 years before I joining WVU. So am I eligible for such kind of program application?
Okay, so the CRII program that you mentioned is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the morning, is like career. It's not quite like career. CRII is a size-wide program. It's not a SaTC specific program. It's across all of size, all the directorates, all the divisions, all of the programs. So just to be clear that this isn't SaTC specific. The rules are that you have to be within the first 2 years of an academic position. Time spent in industry as a postdoc, on medical leave, on family leave, do not count against that 2-year limit. It's only time spent in academic positions.
They've changed it.
Yes.
Are you sure they've changed it? Because at
Yeah.
one point it did also say you had to be within 2 years of the PhD.
No, I'm sure of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are 3 of us who are running the program, and I'm one of them, so I know.
Thank you.
Sure. Pass the microphone somewhere else.
So I have a question primarily about the reviews, and I know some of us are potentially going to be working some crypto projects. Do you have any methods of handling ITAR restricted data in proposals?
Certainly, obviously, everything has to be unclassified, but I think there's an ITAR exception for academic stuff. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the answer. That's not come up in my time at NSF. Please contact me, and I will look into it rather than totally making up an answer.
Right, and I guess similar question also about transition to practice, particularly if you require it has to be open sourced and it's ITAR, there's possibly conflict there, right?
Yeah, contact me.
Okay, sure.
I think the requirement to be open source is written right there in the solicitation. If you say I can't do it, we'll say we can't give you a transition to practice. That's all there is to it.
A question about the eager awards. Could you say a little bit about the expected difference in, say, scope or preliminary work or outcomes for an eager compared to a small proposal?
Yeah, well, okay, right. So there's lots and lots of kinds of eagers. There's plain old vanilla eagers, which are given when a program officer thinks that there is something that's truly novel, that wouldn't do well on a panel. Those are very rare. There are also plain old vanilla eagers that happen when somebody submits a proposal and it gets declined because it's a really interesting idea, but there's no preliminary work, and so we'll give an eager, we'll contact the PI and say, hey, PI, would you be interested in an eager? Both of those are typically around 150,000, 2 years. And then there are some of these special purpose eagers, like what Heng was just talking about, the new collaboration ones, what Victor was talking about earlier for the education eagers, those are more targeted. They're sort of like mini smalls, but they don't go through the external review process. They go only through an internal review process. Did I answer your question, sort of?
Yes. What's your internal review process?
The internal review process is usually 2 program officers review the proposal and make a decision. You don't get panel reviews because there are no panels. You typically get a short, a paragraph or 2 response. You get much less feedback on an eager than you do on a regular proposal. Yeah. And there's no panel summary either, obviously.
There's not a lot of money for eagers.
Yeah. Well, with the exception of the new collaboration eagers and the education eagers, which are the special cases, maybe a half dozen a year out of 300 awards roughly we did this year. I think we did, what did we do, 280 something awards this year? And I think they're not counting those 2 special categories. I think we did fewer than a half dozen.
But just for the record, NSF uses the peer review because Congress makes us. And then we sort of got permission to spend up to something like 1% of all the foundation's money in a way that doesn't use the review process. So we can go out on a limb and bet on something as long as across all of size we haven't, gone beyond 1%. And usually it's because someone would contact us and say, I've got this great idea, or we hear about the great idea through the proposal review process. The SaTC has, and I think it says in the GPG that you have to sort of be invited by a program officer. You can't spam us with eagers because we'll just send them right back to you. But SaTC's gone beyond this and is using it in kind of a new way, which is to say we want to build up capacity in a certain area. We're going to use the eager mechanism, double check that we're not exceeding our percentage or whatever, and that way maybe we'll get 5 or 10 or 20 things started that will turn into real proposals, and then we bootstrap something new.
Okay.
An unused mic.
All right, are we ready to move to our closing then, if there's no other questions? Whoa.
Is the closing a question period?
I think I think the closing is where we all thank Rebecca for doing everything, but.
We do have another question.
Okay.
So it's about CRI, right? So I know the PI salary is not allowed, but like travel money or what are the other than graduate student support?
Okay, so for the CRII program, the expectation is that most of the money will be for undergraduate or graduate students, and I want to emphasize the undergraduate, especially for those of you who are at undergraduate-only institutions. You're more than welcome, encouraged to do that. So most of the money is expected to go for students. Some of it can go for travel for yourself or for your students. Some of it can go for equipment. They're not specific dollar amounts or percentages, but we're expecting the large majority of it to go to student money.
Follow up. When you say undergraduate, is it like does it count toward the 170K limit or could be an REU supplement?
The 175 limit is for the proposal itself. You could subsequently, after the first year, you could get an REU supplement for additional undergraduates, yes. And I think it even says that in the FAQ. Yeah, I'm sure it does because I wrote it.
So I also have a question about CRII. How much like a career does this need to be? Because you write a career in a different way that you write typical proposals. You have to focus more on career development and,
Yeah.
you know.
CRII is pre-career. It's don't quote me on this, and the camera is off. This is intended to help you get ready to write your career proposal. And so it doesn't have the education part. It's really just seed money to jumpstart things. You're not expected to have preliminary work, or excuse me, preliminary results. Some people will from their PhD or from their postdoc or from industrial experience or whatever, but we're not expecting that sort of thing.
But are you expected to outline a long-term career plan?
No. We're expecting you to outline 2 years, and some people will, as part of it, also say, and this is what I'm going to, how it's going to help me get ready for a career proposal, but certainly nothing beyond the, and this is going to get me ready for a career proposal.
One thing you should probably be aware of, this number right here. Science expects to make 25 to 30 awards each year. If you look at something and you say, if you look at a project and you say, you know, I think this might make a good SaTC proposal, a good SaTC small category proposal, you might be better off spending the extra time and making a good SaTC small proposal, giving a little more time, a little more money, as opposed to being one of these people going for 25 to 30 awards across all of computer science. You know, yeah, that's all of computer science, 25 to 30 awards. There's not a lot of these available this year. It's going to be tight, and so don't take and say, well, I'm going to submit to this one instead of submitting SaTC, or say, well, I'm going to submit a good idea here and then try to come up with another good idea for SaTC. Spend your time writing one really good proposal and submit it to the place where you think it's most appropriate. And if after writing the proposal you say, well, this is really a 3-year proposal, don't try to shoehorn it into that program. You know, make it a really good proposal for SaTC. But if you've got something that doesn't fit well in any existing program, this might be a good thing to jumpstart it.
Yeah, I just want to show you on the screen, there's 14 programs that participate in CRII and 25 to 30 proposals across those 14. So you can expect there will be approximately 2 or 3 out of SaTC. Just to reinforce what Chris is saying, don't think of this as an easy, I mean, I don't know what it's going to be like, but I don't expect it to be trivial. Let's go to the back and then we'll come back to you again.
Can a PI from a NSF, from a university in a NSF EPSCoR state do anything differently in their proposals? Or maybe another way to put it is, does SaTC have any specific calls for such universities?
Chris, Saul, since you've been around the longest, you want to talk about EPSCoR?
What is the question about EPSCoR? Just are the proposals treated differently?
Can we do anything differently as a PI from some universities, or is there any...
What can the PI do differently if you're from an EPSCoR state? Okay, not how does NSF review it, but yeah, I think that the EPSCoR states, EPSCoR is a program to create some kind of stimulation of research in states that get less than their 2%. I mean, it's really that way. Take 50 states, divide it into 100%. That means your state should get 2%. If you don't, your senator is going to, you know, if you make less than 2%, your senator is going to make sure that you get you can apply for this money. States can change whether they're EPSCoR from year to year. So for example, I think Delaware came back on the map 5 years ago, and Iowa was off the map, and now they're on the map again. So approximately half of the states are eligible for EPSCoR. The states sometimes have special areas that they concentrate in and that they care about. They actually listed this for us in certain years, but not in the last 3 years. You might want to say something, though, about your region, like in Missouri or Mississippi or somewhere, they say that, we're emphasizing cybersecurity. We have, 3 labs in the states, and we collaborate on research. And so that would be a strength to a proposal from an EPSCoR area for you to say, we're from an EPSCoR state and we do this. Being from an EPSCoR state, there might be underdeveloped areas, there might be outreach and other broader impact things that you might want to do. I think if you emphasize that in your proposal, then you're appealing to the right things. So, I mean, a little bit of that, but otherwise your proposal's the same. What NSF does is we say if your proposal's highly competitive, EPSCoR is not going to give us any matching funds. And the way this works is matching funds, so that if we have a proposal, we want a fund, we might apply, we write an application to EPSCoR to someone on a different floor in our building and say this is why we think it should be funded. And if it's highly competitive, they'll say no way. If it's a borderline proposable, they'll consider it, and then they'll look at a bunch of questions about, is this good for your state, and things like that.
Thank you.
How do you define a new collaboration for eagers, new collaboration?
How do we define it?
What does it mean, a new collaboration?
It means a computer scientist and a social scientist who have not worked together before, where work together typically means published or received a grant together. It's not a hard and fast rule, but if you have received a grant together, that would be very suspicious.
Yeah,
if you published, published together, there could be a case. There was one case where we, where one of the two collaborators was the first author and the other was the 7th author, and was noted as having done some number crunching or something, very minor. And so that was the exception. But other than that, in general, we would consider prior joint publication to be a collaboration. You want to add to that?
I actually have a follow-up question I got from a conversation with a PI today. She asked the question that I didn't give a definite answer because I'm not so sure. What will happen if a computer scientist and a social scientist submitted an NSF proposal in the past, and then that proposal wasn't funded? Does that constitute they collaborated? No. Okay, great.
It violate confidentiality rules. Next question?
You're the other direction as well. You guys are almost portfolio managers. You're giving out money to produce good research. When your boss comes to you guys, and says, what have you guys done? And they want to say, we've produced research that has this many publications or has produced these breakthroughs. What do you tell your boss? So that, and then, therefore, how does that kind of almost work back down to us? So I'm kind of just curious on that end. When he comes to you and says, what have you guys done? What is your response backwards?
Go away.
Yes.
I'm
Typically
busy processing awards.
Yes. So there's several types of questions we get. One is, someone 2 levels up is going to be speaking on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Give us a slide highlighting wonderful things that have happened. So if you can give us something that fits on a quarter of a PowerPoint slide that really captures something that congressmen will look at and say, this is exciting and wonderful, that would be beautiful. We don't know when we'll use it. we tend to have maybe a couple of days' notice on things like this. So that's one type of request. Another is portfolio analysis. I got all of 2 weeks on this one. What are we doing in privacy? All the projects we're doing that relate to privacy and what they're about and what aspects.
There were a couple hundred of those.
Yeah, a couple hundred of those that had some relation. It's like which ones are really primarily about privacy, which ones touch on it, that sort of analysis. We get all kinds of different requests. Each one is different. The main thing that you can do to help us out is, again, with annual reports, try to write them in ways that things are searchable, that we can skim through and highlight by keywords, because we may get both your project summaries, your abstracts, and your reports have keywords in there so that when we're searching for something that's appropriate, we'll find your project, whatever that may be.
Some people put media coverage in their annual reports, and that's useful because a lot of times those are things we can point to.
Yeah, and the other things, like if you have media, and the other thing is if you have something that's really exciting, a real breakthrough, give us the soundbite version of it as polished and ready to present a form so that we've got that sitting there, and when there's a call for it, we can give it to someone. And, we love to promote people who are doing wonderful things, and the easier you make it for us, the better it is.
All right.
No? We get,
I think.
okay. Are we getting?
No, I think we're getting pulled off the stage. Before I hand the mic back to Rebecca, I want to ask everyone to please join me in thanking Rebecca.
Thank you, and I want to thank all our NSF program officers, program support from Carl, our 2 students. And thanks to all of you guys for coming, because you're going to be, at future PI meetings not too many years from now, I would think, and we're glad to have helped play a part in that. So I'll be in touch by email still, because if you don't get email from me every day, your lives are not complete, with information about how to join the SaTC list, about the reimbursements and all of that. So, but again, thank you all for participating. I hope you found it useful.